little girl disappears after spending a night at a friend's house. The kidnapper leaves no trace, and the woman who picked her up vanishes into thin air. The more the police investigate, the more they uncover a secret buried for years. Elisa is a first-class flight attendant serving the elite. She frequently travels on flights, enjoying luxurious vacations. Her husband, Fred, is a senior lawyer. George and Lucia are their children. Their life is arguably so happy that thousands of women would envy them. Lucia attends a prestigious private school. When Elisa picks up her daughter from school, she coincidentally meets a mother whose child has recently moved there. This mother's name is Rebecca. Her daughter, Josie, quickly becomes close friends with Lucia. Although Elisa and Rebecca have only met a month ago, she can't resist Lucia's persuasion. She agrees to let her daughter stay at Rebecca's house on the condition that the little girl only stays for 2 hours. But as dinner time approached, the little girl called her mother, saying she wanted to sleep over at Rebecca's house. This had never happened before, so Elisa hesitated and thought about it for a long time. Finally, she decided to go to Rebecca's house to see for herself. She was astonished to find Rebecca and Josie living in a huge villa. Apparently, every detail in the house had been custom designed. The two girls ran and jumped around the room, incredibly happy. Elisa took out her phone to take a picture of that adorable moment, but Rebecca seriously stopped her, saying she wouldn't allow anyone to photograph her daughters. After learning more about Rebecca, Elisa agreed to let Lucia stay over. They agreed that Elisa would bring Lucia home the next day at noon. However, 2 hours after the agreed time, Elisa, who had just boarded a flight abroad, received news from her husband that Lucia still hadn't returned home. Although Rebecca had called her once that morning, the number displayed as unknown, therefore she couldn't call back. A strong sense of unease welled up inside Elisa. She had just returned to the country and hadn't even had time to change her clothes before going to Rebecca's house with her husband. A cleaner opened the door. This person said that the villa was a rental vacation home and not owned by anyone. On the outside, Elisa appeared calm, but inside, she was overwhelmed with guilt. The police immediately held a press conference after receiving the report. They investigated and found that the documents Rebecca provided to the school were fake. The only clue was a sketch created by software based on Elisa's description. She stood before the media cameras, crying and begging Rebecca to understand a mother's feelings and not harm Lucia. Just as everyone felt heartbroken for this family, a reporter suddenly asked 2 sharp questions. The police had sent someone to monitor Elisa's house. Because many kidnappings are orchestrated by parents, even though Elisa and her husband were overwhelmed with grief, they were still considered suspects. The reporter felt this case wasn't like a typical kidnapping, so she tried to talk to Elisa, but was stopped by the agents. She inquired with a teacher at the prestigious school and learned that Rebecca had said Elisa had been bullied at her previous school. That's why she had urgently transferred her daughter to this school for the midterm. Therefore, the teachers didn't know much about her. The police suspected it was an organized kidnapping. They immediately questioned Elisa and her husband about whether they had ever offended anyone. Fred's expression became strange. He spoke evasively, avoiding the issue. Only when he was alone with Elisa did he muster the courage to confess that in January of last year, a girl he met online had initiated contact with him. Because Elisa frequently traveled for work on flights, she wasn't very intimate with him after returning home. Therefore, he quickly developed a clandestine relationship with the other girl. Around February, they even had a 17-minute video call. However, that was the end of it, and they never met in person. Later, when he tried to cut off contact, the girl became furious. She sent a series of threatening messages, vowing to make him regret it for the rest of his life. The police reviewed the school's security camera footage, but only saw Rebecca's back, so Fred couldn't identify her. When he video called her, he didn't look at her face. Reporters also learned that Rebecca deliberately avoided the cameras at school, which is why there were no frontal shots. This was clearly a meticulously planned kidnapping. Rebecca's target was Lucia. Reporters believed that behind Elisa's glamorous facade, there was something she couldn't reveal. That truth was the reason Lucia was kidnapped. In front of George, Elisa had to appear strong. She assured him that Lucia would soon return. Even so, she wasn't sure. After losing her daughter, she was resentful and easily irritable. Soon, she vented all her anger on her husband, but he said at least he wouldn't hand his daughter over to a stranger. This kidnapping shattered Elisa's seemingly perfect life, and she realized how harsh reality truly was. Reporters relentlessly pressed Elisa's social media accounts. Just then, a car sped down a winding mountain road. Lucia, trapped inside the car, slowly regained consciousness. Time flew by. 5 days had passed in a flash. George found a letter outside his door, but quickly forgot about it. After Lucia's kidnapping, Elisa was like a person possessed. She didn't even notice the letter thrown in the corner of her bed. She suddenly remembered the photo of the 2 girls playing that she had managed to take before Rebecca stopped her. She immediately posted it on social media, hoping someone else would know know and provide clues. Reporter Selma, who had been monitoring Elisa's account, received the notification and sensed something strange. Elisa has been active on social media for 7 years now, sharing everything about family travel and food. She didn't hide anything. The only thing was, she didn't mention her previous job or school, as if deliberately concealing something. She seemed more like someone who had changed her identity, determined not to talk about her past. To date, the police haven't found any clues. In a kidnapping case, the longer the time passes, the lower the chances of the victim being alive. The police kindly reminded Elisa not to post any photos of Lucia, because the photo she posted had caused a surge in calls to the investigation team. However, most of those calls were useless, much to the police's frustration. After seeing the police off, Elisa busied herself with taking care of her son. In a moment of distraction, she didn't even realize when her son had left the nursery on the 2nd floor. It was then that she noticed an envelope on the floor. The kidnappers demanded Elisa prepare £100,000 in exchange for Lucia's safety. The police reviewed surveillance camera footage around the house and saw the mailman wearing a baseball cap pulled low over his face, making him completely indistinguishable. There was no way to track him down. Meanwhile, a serious criminal prisoner named Marcus in the jail received the day's newspaper. He carefully cut out the news articles related to Lucia and hid them, with the other news, under his pillow. £100,000 wasn't a huge sum for Elisa's family. Since Lucia's kidnapping, she hadn't worked anymore. Her husband was a senior lawyer, so his fees were substantial. Earning several £100,000 was easy for him. But when Elisa asked her husband for a specific figure, he hesitated. She had no choice but to go to the bank herself to apply for a loan. She was even willing to mortgage their current house if necessary. But the staff told her that her husband had long ago used the house as collateral for a £200,000 loan. She had never heard him mention this, so why would he hide such a large loan from her? At this crucial moment, she couldn't reach her husband. He was currently handling a case involving a criminal gang. It was supposed to go to court, but the witness had unexpectedly refused to cooperate last week, claiming the gang would endanger his family. The witness's denial coincided with the week Lucia was kidnapped. Therefore, he suspected the gang had intimidated the witness. It was even possible that Lucia's kidnapping was linked to this organization. He then followed the witness, but his tracking skills were so poor that he was discovered. In a fit of rage, he attacked, but in reality, it was simply due to stress and overthinking. Neither the witness nor the criminal gang had any connection to Lucia's kidnapping. Selma received a photo from a police informant. She discovered that the mailman was wearing an orange baseball cap. Coincidentally, the police had previously received numerous complaints, including one from someone claiming to know a woman who might be the culprit, along with her social media account. In a clear photo, she was wearing the exact same orange baseball cap. Selma showed the woman's photo to Elisa. It turned out the mailman was a notorious prankster, but he had never actually committed a kidnapping. He was simply using the situation to swindle money from Elisa. Elisa, who had initially thought Selma was genuinely investigating the case, began to change her perspective. However, Selma immediately questioned Elisa about her past. The police were reviewing surveillance cameras day and night at the airport, ports, and gas stations along the highways. The European Police Organization also joined the investigation and sent in surveillance video from a gas station on a highway in France. In it, Lucia appears to be trying to escape, but she is pulled back by a strong man. Marcus carefully writes loving words on a letter and places it gently in an envelope. The recipient is Elisa. In the surveillance video, the man takes Lucia to an old villa in the mountains of France. Rebecca has been waiting there for a long time. She and Josie welcome Lucia warmly. Time rewinds to 9 months before Lucia's kidnapping. At that time, Rebecca had just returned to her hometown when she was called by an old friend of her husband's. Upon hearing her husband's name, she revealed her unconcealed grief. She tearfully said that her husband had died at the hands of a thug 4 years ago. The old friend asked her a few questions. She still smiled. All her pain was hidden deep inside. 7 months before the kidnapping, she bought the old villa in France where her husband used to live. She spent 3 months preparing her next plan. She sought out a restaurant waiter to carry out a series of kidnappings. Rebecca's plan couldn't be done without their help. Then she rented a holiday home in the UK and used the opportunity to approach Elisa to gain her trust. She told Lucia that although what was about to happen was hard to accept, it was all true. The girl's real name wasn't Lucia, but Lulu Rose. Selma's exclusive investigative report on the kidnapping tripled in views overnight. She redoubled her efforts to delve into Elisa's past. From Elisa's social media, Selma found information that her date of birth was March 12. Through the UK birth database, Selma traced every person with the same name as Elisa. After comparing the ages and names, Selma confirmed that Elisa was born into a religious community. This is a very strange community. The entire theme revolves around the color pink or red. Residents don't need to work or use money. Everything is based on bartering. People divide up tasks for the benefit of the community and take care of children together. When the name Elisa is mentioned, the residents here don't have a good impression. Elisa's mother doesn't even mention her, saying that she doesn't follow the community's rules, isn't close to her relatives, and especially has a terrible relationship with her father. At 18, she said she wanted to live a normal life. She resolutely left the community and completely severed ties with her family. The police have confirmed that the man appearing in the surveillance video is a man involved in many serious human trafficking cases. He is a wanted fugitive by the International Criminal Police Organization. His girlfriend is also the restaurant waitress they previously found. At the same time, the police confirmed that Elisa's husband had mortgaged the house for £200,000. He then confessed that the entire sum was used to cover the family's living expenses, Lucia's tuition at the prestigious school, home decorations, and the extravagant lifestyle Elisa always pursued. Selma stayed in that strange religious community for a long time and questioned the first person who greeted her. This person said that Elisa had returned once after her father's death, but since then, there had been no further news of her. Clearly, Lucia was still unable to accept her new name and new life in France. Josie even deliberately showed her childhood photos. When Lucia saw a newborn baby in the photo with a birthmark identical to her own, her small world began to crumble. Could Rebecca really be her mother? On social media, someone posted a video appealing for help in finding Lucia and publicly revealed the kidnapper's portrait. Rebecca feared the police would follow the clues and find her. She questioned the kidnapper and learned that the car had been pushed off a cliff. She immediately went to the agreed-upon location, only to find a deep, bottomless ravine below. The police were temporarily unable to find any clues. She quickly cleaned up the remaining car debris at the scene and hurriedly drove away. Selma reported to the editor-in-chief that Elisa was born into a peculiar religious community, a place where people choose to live isolated from the world. Therefore, Elisa's image as a flight attendant and social media celebrity was actually a complete reimagining, a completely new life. Elisa wrote an investigative report criticizing Elisa's willingness to hand Lucia over to strangers, suggesting it stemmed from her distorted past. At this point, Fred also began to suspect why Elisa had never mentioned her past or introduced him to her relatives. At that moment, a nearby neighbor named Joaquin came to visit and said that if Rebecca needed help, she should just ask, but she refused the offer. Since Rebecca kidnapped Lucia, she had forbidden the two girls from interacting with the outside world. But children grow older and become more curious. Rebecca repeatedly emphasized to the two children that they must not reveal anything to anyone else. Only then did she feel safe enough to take them to the beach to play. But as she turned around, she saw tourists holding a newspaper with Lucia's picture on the front page. Rebecca was about to leave, but her best friend called her back and said that she wouldn't send her two daughters to school, but would have them homeschooled. This required not only patience, but also permission from the authorities. While they were talking, her best friend asked what Lucia's real name was. Lucia stared blankly at the picture, proving her identity. To make Lucia accept the truth more easily, Rebecca said she would help her find more pictures, but in reality, she took out a box from a drawer inside the wardrobe. Among the items found were many old photos and a laptop. She skillfully used software to superimpose Lucia's birthmark onto the photos. She was lying. She wasn't Lucia's mother. To quickly find Lucia's whereabouts, Elisa was forced to seek help from television. The host questioned her harshly and criticized her methods as flawed. The post she published on social media attracted media attention, causing the media to shift its focus to criticizing Elisa's upbringing. Public attention also shifted from Lucia's kidnapping to Elisa's personal life. In other words, the host was implying that Elisa was exploiting her daughter's disappearance to gain attention. She responded that only those who have lost a child understand that feeling. Clearly, she wanted to do something, but she couldn't. Every day she worried about where her daughter had been taken and whether she had been harmed. For a family already in despair, these were wounds upon wounds. The host ignored her pain and asked her why. If she truly cared so much about her child, she would entrust her to a stranger. She could only remain silent, saying she couldn't go on anymore. Selma returned to the religious community. The people there had also read the article about Elisa and corrected a detail that was inaccurate about her. Previously, someone had said that Elisa had returned once when her father died, but that was incorrect. She was actually present at the scene when her father died. The police in charge told reporters that her father died from a fall down the stairs. The people in the community cooperated in the investigation. Ultimately, the death was ruled an accident. The only unusual thing was that on the very day her father died, less than a kilometer from the community, there was a serious car accident on the highway. The scene of the accident still held mementos for the children, such as toy windmills and teddy bears. All were covered in dust and insects after a long time. The perpetrator of the accident was Marcus, the owner of the hotel chain. The hotel chain's logo looked very serious. Selma checked Elisa's social media profile and confirmed that she had indeed stayed at that hotel. The police found the kidnapper's car at the bottom of the ravine. Rebecca immediately received a warning from him. She quickly realized the police were acting much faster than expected. This place was no longer safe. At Rebecca's villa in France, there was a black market broker specializing in fake passports. When he saw Lucia's photo, he immediately realized the seriousness of the situation. At first, he intended to refuse, but because the reward was so generous, they finally agreed on a price of £15,000. They arranged the transaction for the next day. After Rebecca returned home, she retrieved the cash from a secret box. Unbeknownst to her, Lucia was lurking in the shadows, watching Rebecca's actions. The man was the kidnapper. The police had set traps everywhere to catch him. He had no way out and resented Rebecca's imminent safe departure from France. He demanded more money from her. They argued and then physically fought. She nearly lost her life at his hands. Selma texted Elisa, asking if she remembered the name Marcus. Elisa panicked and threw her phone aside. Then she rummaged through a deep drawer and pulled out a series of letters sent from prison. Each one was signed, "Your lover Marcus." Selma relentlessly questioned her. Elisa was on the verge of collapse. Although she didn't want to admit it, the truth was unfolding before her eyes. Marcus was her lover from 5 years ago. He had accompanied her back to the religious community to visit her father. That day was the day her father died, and also the day of the fatal accident. They were both present at both events. But Elisa had never mentioned this to anyone. What was she hiding? Was Lucia's disappearance related to those two things? Elisa refused to say. Selma, however, said she had applied to visit Marcus in prison. The truth was about to be revealed. Elisa decided to visit Marcus first. After 5 years, she didn't recognize him because he had been so hardened by life in prison that he had changed so much. But the look in his eyes when he looked at Elisa was still devoid of love. She asked him if he had ever told anyone about what happened 5 years ago. He only replied that he did everything for them and for their son. The story began 5 years ago. At that time, Elisa already had a daughter, Lucia. She met Marcus on a flight. They quickly fell into a secret affair, resulting in a son. Elisa said that since childhood, she had lived in a suffocating community. Her father had repeatedly abused her, but her mother turned a blind eye to it all. The community's residents also remained indifferent, citing the need to survive. As an adult, she escaped, but recently received news that her father was terminally ill with only 6 months to live. Marcus saw this as a great opportunity for her family to reunite. Although their relationship couldn't be made public, she still hoped he could meet her family. Under his persistent pleading, she rarely returned to the community. Her parents were very welcoming, but she still felt nauseated just looking at her father's face. During a meal, her father made an excuse to leave the table. She felt uneasy. Then she discovered him standing outside her bedroom door, staring intently at Lucia. Painful memories from the past immediately overwhelmed her. At that moment, she had only one thought. She absolutely would not let Lucia suffer what she had gone through. Thanks to Elisa's advice, Marcus refused Selma's request to meet. Selma had no choice but to search through court documents to gather information. She discovered that a man and his daughter, Rose, had died in the accident years ago. Many photos were taken during the trial. Among them was a man with very familiar eyes. Selma compared them to the police sketch from the kidnapping case. It was Rebecca. Elisa showed the photos to Fred for identification, and he confirmed that Rebecca was the British woman she had met online. She had said she dreamed of buying a villa in the mountains of France to live with her daughters. That mountain was near the cliff where the police found the kidnapper's car. Rebecca threw the kidnapper's body down a cliff and cleaned up the blood at the scene. Afterwards, she stood in front of a mirror and wept silently. The accident years ago had turned her into a real monster. Knowing Elisa was about to go to France, Selma offered to go with her. On the way, Elisa asked Selma if she already knew what had happened. Selma said she had always suspected something because both Elisa and Marcus were in the car involved in that accident. But for some reason, Marcus remained silent in court. When it was time to pick up her passport, Rebecca couldn't meet the broker. She began to worry that the police had tracked her down. Her mind drifted back 5 years. At that time, she, her husband, and their 2 daughters were traveling. Her eldest daughter was carsick, so they had to get her out of the car to comfort her. Finding a kidnapped girl in France was very difficult. The quickest way was to check every school to see if Rebecca had enrolled her daughter. The school staff recognized Elisa as Lucia's mother, the kidnapping victim. But due to regulations, they weren't allowed to reveal the information. Just then, the police issued a warrant for Rebecca's arrest. This meant she would speed up her escape. Understanding the urgency of the situation, the staff repeatedly reminded Elisa that if Rebecca didn't want to be discovered, she would certainly have her children homeschooled. The homeschooling records were to be kept at the mayor's office. Sure enough, a mother had come to request permission for this. The reporter suggested this was a serious matter and that the next step should be to report it to the police. Elisa readily agreed. While Selma was making the report, Elisa quietly started the car and drove away. Rebecca had finally obtained the fake passport, but just then, police sirens blared from downstairs. Clearly, the police had arrived. She managed to leave before being discovered. While Rebecca was away, Lucia found the box hidden inside. It was then that she realized all the birthmarks were fake. Rebecca wasn't her real mother. The bloodstains on the floor were horrifying. The body in the cave was slowly decomposing. At that moment, she felt real fear. She just wanted to run as far away as possible. Just when Lucia thought she was saved, Rebecca stopped a neighbor who was about to call the police. Rebecca ordered Josie to quickly pack her belongings and leave. Meanwhile, Lucia took advantage of Rebecca's momentary lapse of attention and once again turned around and fled. Using the address provided by the mayor's office, Elisa quickly found the old house on the mountain, but no one was inside. However, the remaining traces of habitation and Lucia's familiar scent made Elisa certain she hadn't gone to the wrong place. She followed the open back door up the mountain. Fortunately, she spotted a figure passing by. This was the first direct confrontation between Elisa and Rebecca. Rebecca said Elisa had stolen everything from her. It turned out that 5 years earlier, after Elisa pushed her father down the stairs, she and Marcus drove away from the scene. But while driving on the highway, they inadvertently caused a murder that took away Rebecca's 2 dearest loved ones and completely destroyed her life. Later, because Elisa was pregnant, Marcus agreed to take the blame for her. Meanwhile, she continued to live what seemed like a perfect life alongside her current husband. Rebecca screamed that she had ruined everything. Elisa said that when she was Lucia's age, she had suffered her father's abuse. Terrified by his gaze towards Lucia, she pushed him down the stairs and immediately fled with her daughter. But in her haste, she didn't notice Rebecca's family's car parked by the roadside. Finally, she admitted her mistake and knelt down, sincerely apologizing. Being a mother herself, Rebecca understood her feelings. After struggling between love and hatred, she told Elisa that Lucia had run into the woods. Rebecca said Lucia had gone back to live with her other family. Now, only they remained. Rebecca led Josie on their escape. Elisa, meanwhile, prepared to face trial. Fred, far from abandoning Elisa because of the affair, remained steadfastly by her side. Ultimately, the court found Elisa guilty of dangerous driving causing death and obstruction of justice. Considering the special circumstances, she was sentenced to 6 years in prison. Her husband and children are still waiting for her 6 years later. Perhaps everything will return to how it was before. The film ends here. Thank you for watching, goodbye, and see you again.